Welcome back to Teenage Nightmares, the place where every story drags you deeper into the corners of the unknown. Tonight's story takes us back to a cozy, nostalgic Christmas tale of the 90s. So sit back, dim the lights, and settle in for a Teenage Nightmares original, a Christmas tale you won't soon forget. Hello, my name's Chris. This story takes place many years ago, Christmas Eve, 1996 to be exact. I was 15 years old and home alone. My parents had some last-minute Christmas shopping to do, and the only store open late was Super Kmart. It was 45 minutes away. I had no desire to join them for such a long drive, especially in the snow. Staying home and playing Mario 64 sounded like a much better plan. I was upstairs, playing video games and snacking on junk food when I heard a noise outside. My bedroom was right above the front door, and the sound was faint but distinct. Someone or something messing around out front. Curious, I pressed my face to the window and peered down, but it was too dark to make out anything. Shrugging it off as an animal, I returned to my game. About 15 minutes passed before I heard it again. This time, it wasn't just noise. It was a knock at the door. My heart raced. It couldn't be my parents. They'd only been gone an hour. For a moment, I froze, listening to the silence that followed the knock. Finally, I gathered my courage and crept downstairs to check the peephole. To my surprise, it was a man dressed as Santa Claus. I stepped back, with unease prickling down my spine. Without opening the door, I turned and headed back upstairs, hoping he was just a drunk who'd stumbled onto the wrong house. But those hopes were shattered minutes later, when I heard him shouting, his voice rough and slurred, echoing through the quiet night. "I know you're in there, kid. I know you're alone," he taunted. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I froze, paralyzed by fear, as his next words sent a chill down my spine. "Let me in. I just want to hurt you." He lingered outside the front door, his voice dripping with an unsettling calmness. I sat frozen in my room, every creak of the house making my skin crawl, wondering how long it would be before he tried to break in. It only took a few minutes before I heard the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. My heart skipped a beat. I had to act fast. I bolted for the attic. It was tucked away in my parents' room, and not exactly easy to find. My legs burned as I raced up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. From downstairs, I could hear him moving around, his heavy footsteps echoing through the house. Then, his voice came, calm and chilling. Come here, little boy." Tears blurred my vision as I huddled in the attic, my body trembling. I thought for sure I was done for. Eventually, he made his way upstairs. I could hear the floorboards creak under his weight as he drew closer. He started with my room. I could hear him trashing it, flipping over furniture, throwing things around in a frantic search. Then, as if frustrated, he moved on, making his way into my parents' room. The sounds were unbearable, the ripping of sheets, drawers being pulled open, and the smashing of glass. All the while, he shouted for me, his voice growing angrier with each passing second. "Come out now, you little shit," he muttered to himself, as if he were trying to convince himself I would listen. I dared to peer through a tiny crack in the attic door. That's when I saw him. In his hand was a sharp blade, maybe a machete, but I couldn't be sure. But it didn't matter. I knew he was looking for me, and I knew he wasn't leaving without me. Then it happened. His eyes locked onto the attic ceiling, and in an instant, he rushed toward it. Panic surged through me, but I remembered there was another exit, a small door that connected the attic to my room. I bolted for it without hesitation, my heart pounding in my chest. As I ran through the narrow passage, I caught a glimpse of him in the attic, his shadow moving quickly in my direction. I didn't dare slow down, though. I rushed for the front door, but just as I was about to make it outside, he was suddenly right behind me. His grip was like iron, yanking me back with terrifying force. Before I could even scream, he threw me into the bed of his red pickup. "I got you now, you little shit," he said to me as he got in the driver's seat. We drove for what felt like hours, the road twisting and turning through the night, until finally, we arrived at an old and rundown house in the middle of nowhere. He paused as he walked me up to the front door, turning to face me with a twisted grin. "Take a look, kid," he said in a low, mocking tone. "This is the last thing you'll ever see. Isn't it pretty?" He chuckled to himself, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine, and continued dragging me into the rundown house. The moment we stepped inside, the smell hit me: decay, rot, and something worse. It felt like death itself had taken root in this place. The walls were smeared with some dark, sticky substance, while the carpets were so black they seemed to swallow the light. I tried to keep my composure, telling myself one thing over and over: I'm not going to die here. I saw where he was taking me. It was an old rusted dog cage, its bars bent and worn. My blood ran cold. I knew I had to do something now, or I was as good as dead. My eyes landed on the machete in his holster, and without thinking, I lunged for it. The blade sliced across his arm, drawing a sharp, guttural yell from him. I took my chance and ran. The only problem being we were in the middle of nowhere. It was 1996, and calling for help wasn't as easy as pulling out a cell phone. All I could do was keep running, my lungs burning and my legs screaming to stop. After about 10 minutes, I slowed pace to catch my breath. Big mistake. In the distance, I could hear him, his heavy boots pounding against the frozen earth, getting closer. He was still chasing me. Panicked, I pushed myself to keep moving, but the uneven ground worked against me. I tripped and hit the cold, hard ground, pain shooting through my hands and knees. I tried to get up and run, but he was already towering over me, a sinister grin on his face. "You almost made it, kid," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "You were so close to the main road." I glanced past him, my heart sinking. I was close, but he already had me. He raised the machete high above his head. The blade was sharp and fierce. "And now, you're mine," he said while laughing. Just as he prepared to strike, headlights suddenly cut through the darkness, illuminating us both. He hesitated, distracted for just a moment, but that moment was all I needed. I kicked him as hard as I could in the stomach, forcing him to stumble back. Without thinking, I scrambled to my feet and bolted toward the road. I waved my arms frantically, praying the driver wouldn't speed past. The car slowed to a stop, and relief hit me like a tidal wave when I saw the uniformed officer inside. The man dressed as Santa didn't even try to run. He was arrested on the spot. What they found in his house still haunts me to this day. In a dusty, forgotten room in his basement, they discovered the decaying remains of 7 teenage boys. And those were just the ones they'd found. During questioning, he confessed that every year since 1976, for 20 years, he dressed up as Santa Claus and lured teenage boys to their deaths. He never explained why. He just did it. That was the last Christmas I ever celebrated, and I'll never stop hating the holiday. A Teenage Nightmares original, The Evil Santa. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.